I do want to start with the I don't know if it's the reason they lost, because it's not like if he'd have played more, they would have necessarily won, but it would have probably given them a chance to win and at least slow down Steph Curry. But the question on a lot of people's minds was why Davion Mitchell played a total of 8 minutes in game seven. He only played, I think, 2 minutes and 45 seconds in the second half. So that was kind of a big deal considering the fact that Steph Curry scored 50 points, was having his way with the Kings, and especially in the second half. And he torched him. He torched him, and the best defensive weapon, who, quite frankly, played to such a good degree earlier in the series that we started talking about whether or not Steph Curry could sustain a certain workload that he needed to put out in order to win this series or even go much further beyond it. And that guy that was responsible for making Steph Curry work, for bringing up questions of fatigue, not only with us, but in the Bay Area media, was Davion Mitchell. And he didn't play. And like in game six, he didn't play very much. I think he only played about 12, 13 minutes. And Terrence Davis got out there, used up all 6 fouls, was a dog, went out there and just was trying to disrupt, added a little bit more range, did okay. And like at the end of game six, it was almost like, well, now Davion had extra rest. So like now he's really ready to go in and try to slow down Curry even better. He's got a little more rest than even Curry does. And he plays less minutes. And he goes out there probably, I think the only time he went out there in the second half was for his little like 3-minute stretch that he'll go in there for in the third quarter. And then he never came out again. It's bizarre. It's super bizarre because that just seemed like a no-brainer. Again, it's not necessarily that you would have won, but you put yourself in a position to slow down the ultimate point of attack, if there ever was one. And that just never happened. And then to make it weirder, not a single member of the media asked Mike Brown about it after the game. Brendan Nunes kind of was like, is there anything you could have done differently to guard Steph Curry, almost putting it in Mike Brown's hands? But I felt like somebody should have been like, hey, coach, why did Davion Mitchell, for all the reasons I just listed, why did that guy only play 8 minutes while Steph Curry was going off for 50 points? And I don't think you have an answer. I don't have an answer. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing. And I think it's probably why it needs to be brought up first, because I don't know. That just kind of sticks with me. I don't think that's going to be easy to forget. That's just it seems like such a brazen blunder,
Yeah, it's, I mean, I still can't wrap my head around it. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, I get it. Like Davis was doing decent. I don't think he was guarding Steph tremendously, but I mean, he was knocking down threes in the first half. Kings had the lead at the first half, but it's like, man, when it really started to get away from him, it's like, okay, like, let's go to Mitchell. But he just never came in, and Steph just, he dropped the most points ever in a game seven.
Mm-hmm.
And Mitchell's nowhere to be found. He was doing so well too, though. Like, I thought he was like a top 3 player in the series for us, I think, or at least the first 6 games.
Monk and Mitchell, I think so. I think you're definitely right.
Mitch, the best two-way guy. I mean, he was playing tremendous defense on Steph. I thought so. I think he was scoring the ball pretty decently too. Like, we hadn't really seen him throughout the regular season. I thought he was attacking well. His 3 wasn't great. I mean, no one's was. I thought it was pretty average for Davion. I mean, he did knock some down, which is, more than enough, I think, out of him. And yeah, just like your best defender, who had been guarding Steph very well throughout the series so far, gets 8 minutes while Steph scores a record high in a game 7. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Like, is Mike Brown dumb, or was he trying to throw the game? I mean, it's like tinfoil hat at this point, but I'm just like, you trying to help out your old team there, Mike? And why isn't anyone asking? Oh my goodness. It just doesn't make any sense.
There's a part of me that's like, okay, people aren't asking because
they're in on it.
I don't know.
No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, that would be a huge scandal. But, I think one of the things that's interesting is a lot of the members of the media, they recognize that, like, getting this far, taking it to a game 7, like you said, that's icing on the cake, basically. So maybe there's not a huge inclination to press, considering the fact that this team has not done anything for a decade and a half. And Mike Brown has done something incredible by just completely turning the bus around. Like maybe they just didn't feel the need to press him on it. But even then, that's a sorry excuse.
Yeah, for
That's not,
journalists.
yeah, that's not being journalists at all. And I mean, there's, yeah, I don't know. We don't need to get into whether or not some of these guys are actual journalists or not, but you know, the fan comes out a lot of them, and it did in this series. I don't know if you followed Twitter at all, but yeah, we won't need to name names, but it's just like, get off Twitter. You're a journalist. You're an adult. I don't know why you're getting into arguments with 17-year-olds,
Yeah,
but
fair enough.
it's ridiculous. And like, I get it. Like, I don't think Davion Mitchell shot very well in game 5, which was kind of why I thought like, okay, we'll go with a little bit of Davis. But it's like, even Davis in game 7, like I think he went like 3 of 5 or 3 of 6 to start the game. And then he didn't hit a 3 until like the final seconds when the game was long lost at that point. And his
Hmm.
defense wasn't even good in game 7. Like, to end the
No,
first quarter, Curry scored like 8 points off him. And then he was doing the same thing to start the second quarter. And it just makes no sense. It's a huge letdown, and we're not going to get enlightened on it. It seems like, which is a real disappointment. Exit interviews are going on right now as we speak. They're not being broadcast online or anything, so I can't watch them. I'll have to see them later. But I doubt anybody's asking him then. Hopefully they are, but it just makes no sense. Like I said, even if they play Davion Mitchell, they still probably lose this game. Like that doesn't escape me. But it's just like, you don't you don't do that. Don't put your best defensive weapon out there for just 8 minutes. And Curry wasn't even out there for all 8 minutes. When Davion first came into the game, Curry left the floor. They'd been doing that a little bit, I think after like game 2 or 3. And so like his 8 minutes weren't even all out there with Curry. And after the game, Mike Brown was like, yeah, like I'll be rooting for the Warriors from here on out. And like that makes sense. And of course, like if he had played Davion Mitchell 28 minutes, you look at that and you don't bat an eye at it. But then it's like, but you didn't play him. You played him 8 minutes, and you're saying you want them to win. Like, you're just making a bunch of people like speculate now. Not to say that like any kind of theories are true or not, but it's just like, this is not good for optics. I feel like it just feels like you're driving a lot of fans crazy. It seems it's just all you're left to do is scratch your head, and it just seemed kind of like a mistake, like a pretty fat mistake, shooting yourself in the foot by not playing Davion Mitchell.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was the biggest mistake of the game, but it was definitely the one that was just the most head scratching. Of it's just like, why wasn't he out there? It just it just didn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know. I hope something comes out on it, or maybe I don't think he was hurt. I don't know. It's
No,
just it's odd. It's just super odd.
Mike Brown obviously had a great season. He was coach of the year, first ever to be unanimously voted as such. Terrific season for him. I don't take anything away from it, but it's like that, and then the fact that like when they finally went small in game 6, it worked. And he was talking about it, and this is not far off from his typical way of kind of attributing credit to different people. But also, it's just weird because he's like, yeah, Robbie Lemons, who's the analytics guy on the coaching staff, and Luke Lux, who's one of the main assistants, was, I guess, quote unquote, beating Mike Brown over the head about how they need to play smaller and all that stuff. And then Brown finally relented for game 6. It won them the game. And Chris Biederman, after the game, after the win in San Francisco, asked Mike Brown, like, why were you reluctant to go small? And like Mike Brown didn't really answer the question. So it's like, I'm not saying that like, oh, we need to keep an eye on Mike Brown. We might need a coaching change soon. Like, of course, that's not the idea here. But it's interesting after you kind of get over the Cinderella season, different things come up and things are going to get interesting. And there's going to be things to keep an eye on about Mike Brown. Because it's just the decision not to play Mitchell, the reluctancy to go small, and then having your assistants have to do it. I don't know. It's just something to keep in mind at the end of the day. Of course, Mike Brown's still a great coach. I think it was a great hire by Monty McNair, but there are things to keep in mind now going forward, kind of keep a little list of things that kind of rub you the wrong way. And I feel like these are kind of the first major ones for Mike Brown's tenure with Sacramento.
Yeah, just weird. Yeah, I mean, there are just it just seems like bad coaching in the playoffs. It's kind of like the last thing you want to see, really. But those are just two kind of big mistakes, in my opinion. Like you don't took you that long to figure out how to go. You had to be like coerced into going small against the Warriors. I mean, shouldn't that just be a given to a point?
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah.